How's it going, candle makers? Crying Chimney here, and since I am crying, I decided I may as well put my tears to good use and do a tier list real quick. This is probably the most important tier list ever, because it could save your life the next time you're in a verbal disagreement. What we are going to be doing today is we are going to be ranking which animal name is the best insult. It's quite common for various animal names to be used as insults, and sometimes they can be quite effective, other times not so much. We're going to be going through it, and we're going to start with a classic, the chicken. Being called a chicken, right? A coward, if you would. Chicken is an interesting one, because it's not, in my opinion, a very powerful insult. It's not a very stirring insult. But Disney original movies treat it as if it is one of the greatest verbal body slams you can perform on another human being. And I'm pretty sure Marty McFly, got in a car accident that changed his life because he was trying to prove that he wasn't a chicken. So, in my opinion, this is not a very powerful insult, but I'm trying to make an objective tier list here, and given the way that other people seem to react to it in Disney original movies, I'm gonna put that at B for now, B tier insult. But I would say that being called a chicken as an insult is the sort of insult that its effectiveness depends on your own self-worth and self-valuation, right? If you are completely happy with your life choices and someone calls you a chicken, you will feel nothing. Next up, continuing the trend of barnyard farm animals, we got the cow. And for the cow, I found the most relaxed image of a cow I could ever find. Cow is not a super common insult. I mean, none of these are super common. But cow is the type of insult, it generally just means, you're being obnoxious, you're being annoying. I think it's more effective than chicken, because I think it's more rude than chicken. I think being called a cow might elicit a more powerful emotional response of, what did you call me? Right? I also think it's more effective on older people. If you call, a 25-year-old a cow, they're probably just gonna laugh at you. But if you call, a 48-year-old a cow, then that's okay, what did you just call me? Pig. And by the way, this pig is also similar to the cow, living the high life and loving it. Pig is an interesting one, because their flesh is most like that of man, and they're actually quite an intelligent animal. It's quite a smart creature. So, really, the only ammunition people have against pigs, and what makes it an insult at all, is that they roll in mud, and I guess eat a lot of food. I feel like a pig probably eats a proportionate amount of food to what it needs. But the stereotype is pig eats a lot, right? And so if you're ever gluttonous or greedy, you might get called a pig. I think for now, pig might be our first A tier, but it has the potential to move down. I would say it has no potential to move up, but could move down. I think being called a pig is one of those insults that might kind of stick in your head a bit, right? You would sort of need to be a bit emotionally vulnerable, I suppose, for it to stick in your head. But, if someone calls you a chicken, you're probably not thinking about it 2 weeks later. And the same is probably also true of pig, but you might be thinking about it 2 weeks later and being like, oh, that person called me a pig, that wasn't cool. Next up is donkey. Donkey, I don't think this is a very effective insult. People might be mad at me, people might disagree. I think if I was ever called a donkey, I would just laugh. I don't think it's particularly rude. I don't think it's particularly mean-spirited. Donkeys don't really have stereotypes. It also is just call me an ass, right? At least that has a little bit of bite to it. Calling me a donkey is just nothing. This is gonna go C tier, honestly. Find a better insult if you're using this one for real. Oh, Gordon Ramsay says you donkey. It's cool when he does it. I don't know. If he called someone a pig or a cow, I think you can all admit, as much as you might love those clips where Gordon Ramsay calls someone a donkey, you have to admit that if he called them a pig instead, it would be a much more vicious insult. It would be far more biting. Little bit of a wild card here. This is a galah. A galah is a type of Australian bird, fairly common, at least in my part of Australia. And galah is also sort of an insult. It means dumb person, but in a sort of loving way. Like a sort of affectionate, endearing way, right? If someone, cuts you off at the intersection, and that annoys you because, I hate when I get cut off at intersections, and you're, like, road raging a little bit, you're not gonna be like, this bloody galah! Like, no. But if your friend kind of, like, stumbles and, nearly trips and drops something, but they manage to catch it, you might be like, you galah. It's rare, I'll be honest. This is not it's not a common turn of phrase. And when it is used, it's not a biting insult. And this is a tier list about which animal insults sting the hardest. So this is probably C tier. Is it more vicious than donkey? Is the question. This is intentionally endearing and affectionate. And this is... I feel like... Because if you call someone a donkey, you're probably trying to hurt them and it just didn't work because you chose a very unpowerful insult. Donkey's going to C tier. I'm sorry, I'm moving it down. Donkey's going to D tier. Galah's the new head of C tier. Because donkey is just, you're probably trying really hard to hurt the other person's feelings if you call them a donkey. And so the fact that you're genuinely trying to elicit that response and it's ineffective, it just makes you look like a fool, right? Galah, you're not going to hurt their feelings, but you weren't trying to, and they know you weren't trying to. So it's C tier because it's ineffective, but at least you shouldn't be embarrassed by saying it. Next up, we got another bird. This is a vulture. I apologize for the poor image quality. Vulture as an insult is generally used in a mean-spirited way. I feel like vulture is a pretty specific insult, though. Like, if someone's being obnoxious, you can call them a cow. Or if they're not being obnoxious, but you just want to be mean to them, you can call them a cow. But it's a pretty versatile insult. Vulture is quite specialized, which makes it interesting to try to rank. Do we rank it on all the situations where it won't be effective? Or do we rank it on the situation where you would use it and how effective it would be there? Well, let's think here. What is the ideal call someone a vulture scenario? You could call someone a vulture if they were, like, using a tragic circumstance to their benefit, right? If something bad happened and they immediately jumped onto it to try to get some gain out of it. You quite often hear like, lawyers are real vultures, hate lawyers. Everyone hates lawyers until they need their ass defended, okay? Everyone says lawyers are vultures, I hate lawyers are evil, until their donkey, wanders into their neighbor's property and eats a bunch of their fruits, and then you need your ass defended, and you get a lawyer for it. So, I'm gonna rank vulture based on a scenario where you would use it, and I think it's a B tier. I think it's below chicken in B tier. It might make someone kind of feel like defensive if you call them a vulture. They might kind of be like, wait, excuse me? Excuse me, you think I'm a vulture? And it might, if they kind of judged, hey, you're right, I was being a bit of a vulture, it might, change their behavior. But to be honest, I don't know. Then it's not going to make them angry, right? You're not going to call them a vulture and then they, get their fists up. Oh, now you've done it, I'm ready to fight. Last of the birds for this tier list, the dodo. Dodo, very interesting one. This is... I feel like it's in the same kind of tier as galah, where it's sort of affectionate. You're not gonna you killed my wife, you dodo. That's not gonna happen. It's gonna be like, dude, this bloody dodo the other day. Okay, it really is in the same category as galah, because, do people really say this? I know that they do, but can you actually hear a real sentence where dodo is used as an insult in your head? Can you hear that right now? What is the most... Okay, here's a good way. What is the most biting insult that I can come up with where the person is called a dodo? Maybe you could work in the fact that dodo birds are extinct, right? And so it's like, I'm gonna kill you. You're gonna go the way of the dodo. But that would not make me scared. If someone told me they were gonna make me go the way of the dodo, I would not be hiding under my covers that night. You know what I'm saying? I think this is C tier. Oh, is it better than Donkey? Honestly, I think it is better than Donkey, strangely. And I think it's, again, as I was saying before, it's because Donkey, you're trying too hard, right? If you call, yo, you donkey! Like, you're mad. If you call someone a donkey, they, like, got under your skin and you're trying really hard to get back, get one back at them. And it's just not going to work. You call them a donkey, they're not going to cry about it. No, if you want to make someone cry, well, there's nothing in the S tier yet. We need to figure out which animal makes people cry. And I think dodo comes closer than donkey, even though neither is really in for consideration. Eel. Interesting one. The eel. So eel is traditionally used in insult terms as like, oh, you slimy, slithering snake. I don't have snake on this tier list, by the way. Okay, this is eel/snake. There we go. Eel/snake. This is not shake. There's a little thing on there. Okay, I'm gonna redo. Eel/snake. Don't make fun of me for leaving the tail. Is this guy a kindergartner? Kindergartner should go on the list. No, it wouldn't fit. So eel/snake, they fill the same kind of void, and I think they probably are as effective as each other. If you call someone an eel or a snake, you're calling them slimy, slithering, untrustworthy, up to no good, conniving, right? These are the kind of words. I think snake is probably, I would compare it to vulture for snake and eel. Because I don't think if someone calls you an eel, it'll get you angry. I don't think it'll make you cry. But it is, an insult very clearly intended to hurt. And it is also... It is an insult that hurts at least a little bit. But I think it's it kind of depends on if you believe it or not. If someone calls you a snake, and like, oh, you're a real traitor, right? You're a snake. And you genuinely believe that you're not, it's not going to do anything to you. Next up, the humble worm. Worm. Also, what is this line? Why is that line there? Don't like it. Okay, I fixed the line. Worm, this is sort of there's a second line down here. This is sort of the same category, I feel, as snake and eel and vulture. It's not particularly effective, but it does probably have an edge on those two because worm can also mean, like, kind of pathetic, weak-willed, weak-minded, right? Actually, you know what? With that in mind, I'm gonna take it back. I think this is our second A tier. Is it better than pig? It's better than pig. Yeah. It's better than pig because I feel like it might really make you think. It's probably also, as I was saying, like these two, it's probably not gonna make you angry, but I think it is gonna kind of get under your skin a little bit, especially if, all of these insults, as with any insult, you kind of have to buy into it a bit yourself, right? Because if someone calls you ugly, and no part of yourself thinks that you are ugly, it does not matter that they called you ugly. You don't care. If someone calls you a worm, and you kind of feel like maybe you are a worm, then that's pretty effective. But if you're just genuinely, like, happy living your life, someone calls you a worm, not gonna matter. I think it's better than pig. I'm swapping them back. Pig is more effective. I take it back. I was wrong. Pig right now is the highest ranked insult on this animal in name insult tier list. I just think being called a pig has more bite to it and also shows more bad intentions on the part of the person saying it, right? Being called a worm might just mean I don't like what you're doing right now. Being called a pig, you're not going to do that unless you, like, fully hate the person. It might be like, oh, we generally get on, but right now we're kind of enemies, and I'm gonna call you a worm for what you did, but there's, like, an opportunity for us to make up later. If you call someone a pig, there is no opportunity to make up later. You hate that person. you're angry at them. Leech. This is an interesting one. You guys know how I feel about leeches. Honestly, I'm kind of onto leeches, you know. I don't mind the little creatures. Truly don't. But I acknowledge that regardless of your opinion of leeches, as an insult, it's a pretty effective insult. However, this time we got 2 images for leeches, because I do feel like it very, very much depends, as I've said with a few of the other ones, but especially with leech. It depends on if you genuinely believe you are being lecherous. So an example of when you'd be called a leech is if you are using someone else for your own personal gain. So maybe you're like friends with someone, right? The hand, and here's this person, like this is you, right? Maybe you're friends with someone and you're just kind of taking and taking and taking and taking and never giving anything back. Here's the thing, I feel like leech is our first S tier insult if it is an insecurity you have, right? If you're kind of spending your time thinking, am I being a leech? Am I like, I feel like I'm not providing what I could be, I feel like I'm taking more than I'm giving, I feel like I'm not being a genuine friend, then being called a leech by someone will be devastating. Which is interesting, because if you're genuinely thinking that, if you're genuinely having those concerns, then you're probably not a leech, right? You're probably just down on your luck. And it's like, I would help out my friend equally, but right now I'm not in a position where I can. The fact that I'm concerned about that kind of proves that the second I'm in a position where I can, I will. So interestingly, if you think you are being a leech, you're probably not being a leech, but being called a leech will really hurt. And then on the flip side, if you are genuinely being a leech, then being called a leech won't bother you. Or also, if you're not genuinely being a leech, but you also know that you're not. Like, if it's not something you're insecure about and you're not being a leech, it won't bother you. But also, if you are genuinely being a leech, then being called a leech won't bother you either, because it's like, whatever. Weasel is next. And by the way, embarrassing thing to admit, maybe. When I got this image for Weasel, I came to a realization. This is the first time I've ever seen a weasel. I didn't know what weasels looked like. I'd heard the word, and there was... What's that, like, weasel you hit with a hammer? Pop a weasel? What is it? No, it's whack-a-mole. What is the thing you do with weasels where you kill them with hammers in children's arcades? Oh, Pop Goes the Weasel. That's what it is. Yeah, I think I've only heard the ballad Pop Goes the Weasel. And I've never actually seen any sort of animation or documentary about the weasel that popped. Anyway, Weasel, I think Weasel is very comparable to Worm. Which is more effective? Any situation where you insult someone by calling them a worm, you could have instead called them a weasel, right? Because they kind of cover the same bases, where it's, you're a little bit pathetic, you're a little bit sneaky. By the way, it looks like a very proud animal. It's my first time seeing one. It looks like an animal that is very quick, very agile, and very kind of noble. Doesn't it look noble? I feel like it's noble. I think Worm is more effective. Especially now that I've seen a weasel and how noble they look, I think Worm is a more effective insult. Weasel is probably still close behind. I think it's between chicken and cow. I think this is where Weasel belongs. Because weasels... I don't know, like, would you be upset if you were called a weasel? If someone said, hey, you're such a weasel, would you like, no, I'm not. I'm not. How, what? I'm not a weasel. I wouldn't. I think this is a good place for it, though. Some of these might move down to C later, but we'll just have to wait and see. Cockroach. Very low quality, but to be fair, they're only little creatures, right? You snap a photo of them, you gotta zoom in a lot. Anyway, like also with a lot of the other animals here, being called a cockroach, if it was said for the first time, I feel like it wouldn't be an insult, right? If someone had never called another person a cockroach, and then today they did it, it'd be like, oh, what, I'm like really survivable? If no one had ever been called a chicken, and you got called a chicken today, you would not, your mind would not go to being a coward, right? Your mind would go to, what the hell are you talking about? Are you crazy? Are you an insane person? Cockroaches in a similar sort of thing, because, like, sure, they're disliked, but I guess, like, so are spiders, right? They're pretty commonly disliked, and spider isn't an insult. Anyway, cockroach means, I guess it is maybe to do with their survivability. It kind of means you hang around when you're unwanted, right? You're like an irritation, you're an eyesore, maybe. I think it's a decently effective insult. I'd say it's more effective than chicken. Is it A tier? Or is it the top of B tier? I'd say it's one of those two. I'm gonna put it in A tier. I don't think it's above worm. I don't think it's above worm, but I think it's above cow, it's above weasel. We're gonna put it in low A tier for a moment. Rat is next. Another one of those creatures. I mean, just look at this fella, right? Being compared to this, you tell me that's an insult? Are you kidding me? Are you joshing me? Are you pulling on my hamstrings? As far as insults go, being called a rat it's decently common, to be fair, and it can mean a lot of things. It can mean you're, like, dirty. It can mean you're untrustworthy. It can mean you're a traitor. It can also kind of cover the same ground as weasel. Rat is just an upgraded weasel, in more ways than one. I think rat is more effective than cow. I think so. I would say so. I would say rat is more effective than cow. I don't think it's more effective than cockroach. I just don't. But is it low A tier or high B tier? I think rat has to go in A tier just because of how common of an insult it is, right? And it is decently effective. It will kind of get a decent reaction, maybe. I think we have to put rat in A tier just for how prevalent of an insult it is. Toad is next. Once again, how could you hate this face, right? Look at those eyes. Okay, have you ever seen a toad eye up close? Because I haven't until just now. Look at this. That's sick. That's, like, awesome. I want to paint my walls to look like that. I want to have a shirt that looks like this. Yeah, are you telling me you wouldn't rock this? I would rock this. Look at that. That's awesome. That's actually really cool. Nobody sell this. This is mine. I get to sell this. You don't get to sell it. Anyway, the dude in the shirt's going in S tier. It's not an animal name insult, but it's a cool shirt. I'm putting it in S tier. The toad itself, as far as insults go, so this generally just means you're, like, gross, right? Like, oh, you're a toad. You're gross, and you got warts, and you're slimy, but, like, not in a metaphorical sense. I don't know. I don't think toad is a particularly effective insult. Maybe B tier. Probably above weasel, but I think it's lower than cow. I do. And again, I think toad, like, it could get an emotional response out of someone. They'd need to be the person where almost anything would get an emotional response out of them, right? Like, cutting them off at an intersection would get an emotional response out of them, and then toad would be effective. We are down to the last animal insult. This is our tier list before we reveal what the last animal is. Do I want to make any changes? I think I'm happy with this, because this version of leech, completely ineffective. Calling someone a donkey just makes you look silly. These two aren't particularly vicious, but they're also both affectionate. They're not supposed to be vicious, so you don't look, like, dumb for saying them. These are, like, all right, but you kind of have to be... You kind of have to be the kind of person who will respond to anything for these to really get you. Then this is pretty harsh, but I don't think it quite gets A tier. These are, like, you hate that person, right? So even if being called a worm doesn't particularly make you feel bad, right? If being called a worm doesn't make you upset, it will reveal that the person who just said that to you really does not like you at all. And so that, it gets points for that. Even though the insult itself doesn't make you feel bad, the knowledge that the other person does not like you at all might. And then this is just like a cool shirt, and if you're concerned about being a leech and someone calls you one, it would probably hurt. Last thing to rank, the greatest animal of all. Humankind. Except this one doesn't have any bones. Sorry, other way around. Flip that. This one doesn't have any skin. or musculature, because this is not a human being. You're a fool. You thought this was a human being? What are you? What are you? Is it one of these animals mean dumb? What are you, a dodo? What are you, a galah? No, this is not a human being. This is a Neanderthal, okay? We're sticking with the theme of animals. And if the dodo gets to be on here, it's extinct. Neanderthal extinct. Look, being called a Neanderthal is an established insult. It belongs on this list. Unfortunately, I would like to end strong, but Neanderthal is not... It's not really that good of an insult, right? It's probably like B or C tier. I feel like Neanderthal, strangely, and this might be the only example on this list, is the only insult where its effectiveness depends entirely on the accent you have. Like if I say, "Oh, you goddamn Neanderthal," you didn't feel, there's nothing, right? Maybe the corner of your lip turned up with smiling when you hear that. But if I go like, "Oh, you bunch of Neanderthals," it's like, okay, there's something there. It's not much of something, but at least it's like, okay, it's an insult, right? It's just not a particularly potent one. It's above dodo, for sure. Is it above galah? Because again, galah being good-natured, I think, kind of makes up for it not being particularly potent as an insult. Whereas Neanderthal is not good-natured, right? So if you call someone a Neanderthal, you're trying really hard. I think this goes at the top of C. I do. This is an insult tier list, and I think you'd be more upset being called a Neanderthal than being called a galah. But also the person calling you a Neanderthal would look a little stupid. Honorable mentions to wrap things up, things that didn't make the list but are worth considering. Dog. I didn't want to put a dog on the list because I feel like it has a lot of positive connotations as well, right? And being called, "Oh, you dirty dog," it's just, I feel like it can be used as an insult, but it is more likely you're using it as a compliment or like a friendly hello, rather than an insult. I also wanted this list to be about specific animals, not genre of animals, which eliminated rodent, vermin, buzzard, mongrel, cur. So yeah, I wanted it to just be specific animals, not like genre of animals. But also a lot of these are covered, like buzzard and vulture, interchangeable, vermin and rat, interchangeable, rodent and rat. So none of these would have broken particularly new ground. And if you want to see a list that includes all of these, you can just kind of factor them into their closest approximation. Also, for the same reason, we're not doing like the B word, alright? We're not going to say the B word. That's not making the list either, because that's not a specific animal. That is one half of the animals. And I'm also realizing as I'm saying this that cow is also one half of the animals. Because, all cows are female, it's not, the species name isn't cow, but whatever, they're alien creatures anyway, cows, so they get a special pass. And yes, so that's the tier list at the end. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to really get under someone's skin, call them a pig, and if they have insecurities about being a leech, you could call them a leech, but that would be really mean, because if they have insecurities about being a leech, then they're probably not a leech. Closing remarks, an insult is only powerful if you allow it to be. If you genuinely do not care about being called a rat will do nothing to you. Everyone in the entire world deserves happiness, and when someone says something to you with the specific intention of making you feel bad, it can be hard to not feel bad, but honestly, you should try your hardest. So, that's the tier list, that's the soapbox life lesson, and don't be like this guy, alright? Yeah, grow some thicker skin than this guy, you know what I'm saying?